Hello, good evening. This is U.S. Immigration Attorney Sharifa Tharpe. I'm here live to take your U.S. immigration related questions. Go ahead and put your questions in the comments so that I may answer your questions. Now, I have a
Hello,
great
good
topic
evening.
for you today. And that topic is applying for permanent residence through your green card holder spouse. That is one of the questions that I get very often, and I want to make some clarifications about that process. So, yes, a permanent resident spouse can apply for your permanent residence. That can happen if you're in the United States or if you're outside of the United States. However, how the process is going to look is going to depend on what your situation is in the United States. So, as the spouse of a permanent resident, if you are currently maintaining legal status, you have an approved I-130, and you have a current priority date, then that means that you would meet all the right conditions to apply while staying in the United States. I'll give you an example. So if you're here on a visitor's visa, and while you're here on your visitor's visa, you get notification that your I-130 has been approved. And then you can check and see that your priority date is current. That's the date that's on your receipt notice. If you check what's called the National Visa Bulletin, you'll either see a C in the category on the chart. That C means that they can give you a priority date, an immigrant visa right now. And so your priority date is current. If all three of those are right, then adjustment of status will work for you in this case. Now, one of the most important aspects of this is you cannot be out of status. You can't overstay your visa, and you must apply for this adjustment of status. That's the application that you would apply for once you determine you qualify to stay and apply. You will have to submit this application while your status is still current. If it expires while your process is pending, that's okay. But at the time that you are applying, you must have current immigration status. Now, what if you're out of status, right? Then what is that going to look like? Can your spouse apply for you? Now, this is where you have to listen very carefully, because I'm going to tell you it's going to be a different process, and I'm going to tell you how you'll need to go about this. Now, the first is if you are out of status and your spouse is a permanent resident, then you will have to then, it doesn't mean that your spouse can't apply for you. Your spouse can still submit the petition on your behalf. Then when the petition is approved, at that point, you're going to have to apply for a waiver for forgiveness, because you don't qualify to stay in the United States and apply through your spouse, because you're out of status. And chances are, if you're out of status, you've accrued, and the waiver comes in when you have been here out of status for more than 180 days. In that case, once your I-130 is approved, you're here without status, you will have to look at getting forgiveness through that waiver called the I-601A waiver. The I-601 waiver, it's a type of application that allows you to stay here to apply for the waiver. And when the waiver is approved, it will allow you to then arrange with the NVC to do your interview at the embassy in your country, or at the embassy of your choosing if you can't go back to your country. So that is going to be a more complex process. It is going to be a more tedious process, and there's a certain level of uncertainty for that process that can make it nerve-wracking. But this is where getting legal representation and a consultation is going to be very important. But before I delve into what this waiver is all about, because I still have to tell you more about who qualifies. Not every spouse of a permanent resident is going to qualify. They still have to meet certain requirements to qualify for the waiver. But before I get to that part, let me mention this. If your permanent resident spouse is about to apply for U.S. citizenship, US citizenship is around the corner for them, then it may make sense to wait for them to apply for US citizenship. And when they get US citizenship, you submit the adjustment of status application to stay here as the spouse of a US citizen. In this case, you would be able to apply for the permanent residence while being in the United States, even out of status. So that's the difference between being the spouse of a US citizen and being the spouse of a permanent resident. But say your spouse is 5 years out, 4 years out from becoming a permanent resident. And also, what if your spouse just cannot pass the citizenship exam? What if, for example, I've heard of situations where the spouse was unable to read and or write, and because of that, they're unable to pass the citizenship test. In this case, where you want to get a move on, you want to get your permanent resident, and your spouse, you really don't see a light at the end of the tunnel for your spouse to get US citizenship, it's at that point that you would want to consider applying for the waiver through your spouse. So that's just a side note, that your permanent resident spouse can always turn into a US citizen, and that could then fix that situation where you're out of status. Now, what if that's not an option? Let's go back to the waiver. To qualify for the waiver, not only will you have to be the spouse of a permanent resident, so there are a number of things that you have to show and relationships that you could have to qualify you for this. In order to qualify for this waiver, you'll have to have a US citizen or legal permanent resident spouse or parent who will experience extreme hardship if you don't get the green card. Now, what does extreme hardship mean exactly? So it's more than your average inconveniences, right? So for example, it's not going to be my spouse is going to miss me, unfortunately. It's going to be where your spouse is going to be dealing with a number of hardships that could amount to extreme hardship, or they may have except like really one really bad hardship. For example, if they are here, they are facing a life-threatening illness, they cannot move to your country with you, and if you leave, they won't have anybody to take care of them while they're sick. That could be counted as an extreme hardship. Another is if all the small little hardships come together to make the situation one of extreme hardship. So for example, if your spouse is here, you have 2 kids, the kids are the kids, maybe one of the kids are special needs, you have to be there to help with the bills. Your spouse will be, so your spouse, if in the case your spouse would be left to take care of the kids, left to manage the special needs of one of the children, left to do the child care, pay the bills at the same time, work, make time for the children, and then have financial hardships. Maybe they have employment related hardships because now they have to focus on the kids, or if they have to focus on work and then not focus so much on the kids. Those are examples of like smaller hardships that all together will result in extreme hardship for the spouse. Another thing to note here is that you can have another relationship and prove the hardship based on that other relationship. It doesn't have to be based on the spouse relationship. Remember, I said to qualify for this, you have to show that you have a US citizen or legal permanent resident, spouse, or parent. So if you show that your parent can experience extreme hardship, this can also work as well. So once you apply for the waiver and all being well is approved, processing times are ranging anywhere from 6 months to even 2 years. If at that point it's approved, and it is a complex process, you want at this point to make sure you have legal advice and representation. For example, this is what I help my clients with. At this point, once it's approved, it's going to be sent back to the National Visa Center. You're going to meet all the requirements there. And I also work with my clients at that point. And then we go ahead and they schedule the interview after they receive everything. So that is what I have for you on marrying a permanent resident. Now I'm going to take your questions. Put your questions in the comments. I'm both on YouTube and I've been receiving great questions through YouTube. So keep those questions coming. And I'm also on TikTok. So I already see questions on TikTok. Keep putting those questions in so I can get to them right away. Please, how long does it take to get a work permit after the biometrics? So it's up and down, it's all over the place. Some people are, so it ranges. So I wouldn't have a timeline for you. Good afternoon. I have a question. Please, my husband had a green card interview, but his case is under, I think is under review. He recently got a mail to resend his medical. So it's, if he got mail to resend his medical, then he should either get legal advice and representation if there's a problem, or just resend the medical. I wouldn't be able to advise because I don't know what's going on in your situation. But if all they need is a medical to approve it, then definitely he should follow those instructions. But if there's something you're concerned about, make sure you get legal advice. Please, how long? So I answered that. And thanks for the follow. Go ahead, put your questions in the comments and I will answer. So I'm both on I'm both on TikTok and Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. So if you have a question, now is the time to put your questions in the comments. I also already covered the topic about marrying a permanent resident spouse and how you can qualify for permanent residence through that spouse. And I covered, whether you're in status or you're out of status. So you could apply for adjustment of status if you're in status. And then if you're out of status and your spouse can't become a US citizen, then you may want to look at the waiver process. So how to bring my mom if I have a green card. Green card holders can't sponsor their parents. You'll first have to apply for US citizenship. Why my green card pending for 2 years based on asylum? It's backlogged right now, unfortunately. So it's asylum is taking a very your green card based on asylum, everything is taking long. So it's not just applying for the asylum, a green card based on asylum. There is a possibility to expedite. There's always the possibility to expedite, but you do have to show evidence, a reason that you need to expedite it, and it has to fall within certain criteria. So for example, Deja, if you are a nurse or you are a childcare provider, then that could be a basis to get it expedited, because right now that's what they're doing. If you have an error when you filed labor certification, can you call or email to change it? It's going to depend on the what error you have. And so you want to get legal advice on that. You don't want to just, I don't know what error you're talking about. And so it's going to take some evaluation there to determine how to go about it. How long do I have to wait for an IR visa interview in Guyana? So that's if you're the immediate relative of a US citizen. It's going to depend on the embassy. Right now I'm seeing wait times ranging from 3 months to up to a year. It's more on the longer side. So they won't take my I-94. They need the green card. Because of my job, I work at a hospital. So Deja, I'm glad that I brought this up, because if you work at the hospital, that is, you may be considered a healthcare worker, and that may be a basis to expedite your work permit. So get in touch with them. Now they won't take an I-94, but if you have asylum, you should have proof that you have status here. So that's the other question. If you have asylum and you're now applying for the green card, you do have a right to work here because you have asylum, and with asylum, you can get the ability to work. So something isn't sounding right there. So the I-94 they won't take, but they will take a work permit. because the work permit does not limit you. I got my green card and I have to change my social security saying authorized to work. No appointments at this. So it's going to depend on where you are. So you're going to have to contact them separately. They're separate from the immigration service and sort that part out. All right. So keep putting those questions in the comments while I'm here. I'm here to answer those questions. Now, here's another thing is if you have personal legal advice or a personal immigration issue, you haven't asked it here, or you would like to take actionable steps to address your issue, that's where you're going to schedule the consultation. Go to the link in the profile, and then it's going to take you to the website where you can then schedule you can call, you can fill out a contact form, or you can do the online chat. And all three would lead to the scheduling coordinators who will then assist you to go ahead and make your appointment to get legal advice. So Deja, I wouldn't be able to tell you what to say because that would mean I'm giving you personal legal advice. If you need personalized legal advice, then you need to get legal advice. What I can tell you though is on the basis of being a healthcare worker or a child care provider, you may be able to get your process expedited. Now, when you call, they're going to ask you the reason, and sometimes they just issue the work permit. Sometimes they are going to send a follow-up email asking you for proof. And that proof is going to include a letter from your HR verification letter, proof that you are a healthcare worker. What is your position, and the letter from your employer. Hi there, honey bun. So there was an error in email address for labor certification. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what to do. I'm not the attorney. So I wouldn't be able to tell you what to do in your specific case where there's an error. Whenever there are errors, you have to be very careful with that. So get legal advice or representation to get it right. But I can't tell you specifically what to do because I'm not the attorney on your case. So keep putting those questions in the comments and I will answer those questions. So now when it comes to expediting the case, now the first thing is you should request it be expedited. If there are, reasons for example, you're outside of case processing times or you're facing circumstances where you just need help to get it faster, you can definitely, there are different tools. So one is to contact them directly. The other is an ombudsman. And then you can also discuss that with your representative who will put in an inquiry, and sometimes they may be able to help you. And there's also a lawsuit. So that's also another option that where you can sue them in order to compel them to process your case. Is there any way to expedite the I-130 that was filed in 2020? So there are different ways. For my clients, I evaluate their circumstances and I determine on a case-by-case basis whether it is appropriate to expedite it. But there are different ways that you can. It depends on, are you facing an urgent humanitarian need? Is someone or a company facing economic loss as a result of the delay? Are you a child care worker? Are you a healthcare worker? Also, was there an error on the USCIS that caused the delay? Consultation fee is $150 for up to an hour. And in that time, I do give you specific legal advice about your case and also options to move forward with representation should you need it. So, Deja, if you contacted them and nothing happened, you should get legal advice. So at that point where you really are at your wit's end, get legal advice, get legal assistance. TPS to green card, any news for Nepal? So nothing new. All right. So I am going to be heading on over to Instagram and Facebook. On Instagram, I'm the immigration attorney. So if you haven't gotten to ask your question or you have even more questions, hop on over to Instagram where we can continue this conversation. Now I see here, is there any news on DACA? So there is news, and the news is that you can now apply for renewal of DACA online by filing the form and the employment authorization online. But this is for renewals because right now they're only processing renewals because there is a court order to put a hold on DACA, new DACA, not applications, but approvals. Can you travel on DACA out of country or it's not a good idea? So with DACA, you have to specifically provide a reason for why you need to travel and it needs to be approved. You should not be traveling outside of the country. So DACA itself, it's a form of deferred action and it does not allow you to travel outside of the country. However, you do have DACA recipients that they would like to travel for maybe study abroad programs, or they want to travel to go and see family, or they have an emergency where they need. And usually it does have to be a good reason. You can't just apply for DACA and apply for, saying, I just want to take a quick trip to clear my head. It has to be a good reason in order to get this, the ability to travel, and they give you the permission to travel on a limited basis. Thanks for the love. I appreciate it. So keep these questions coming. Now, for those of you who don't know, DACA is deferred action for childhood arrivals, and it is there as a way to help individuals who came at a certain time. They've been here continuously before the age of 16 to be able to gain like a temporary permission to stay here. If you've watched the news, you'll also see that there's a lot of talk about providing a path to citizenship for DACA recipients. However, that is all in limbo right now. If you're out of the country at GC and your GC got lost, what can you do? So if you're outside of the country, it's going to depend on, now you could get an entry to come back into the country with you'd have to go to the embassy, and then you'd have to apply for you'd have to apply to get the lost green card through the I-90 form. All right, so that's going to be it for me today. Thank you so much for joining. Now, if you still have questions, you want to continue this conversation, what you can do is join me on Instagram or Facebook. I'm the immigration attorney, same as here. Join me there, follow me, and then we can continue to talk. We have 1 minute left, so let me go ahead and answer this one. My green card expired while I was out of the USA. I'm stuck. So Edward, I would need to speak with you more, because if it expired, you could still apply for it. And then when you get your extension letter, you could re-enter the country. So it doesn't mean, unless you were outside of the country for 365 days, it doesn't mean that you are not a green card holder. But you should get legal advice and representation, because I would want to figure out what the situation is. How you're going to handle it is going to depend on how long have you been outside of the US. Now, when you say your green card expired, I'm thinking you went out for a short trip and you're trying to come back in and it has expired, or you got caught up outside of the country, and it expired. But if you've been outside of the country for 15 years, then definitely you're going to have to get legal advice and representation, because it's going to depend on what the circumstances were. TikTok fam, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Let me remind you that I'm on here Mondays through Fridays at 4 p.m. Eastern time. So you can always join me to have a great conversation like we did today, to get information about the topics that I come to talk about, and then also to find out how to schedule an appointment or to just get information that's going to empower you through your process. Thanks for the follow. So TikTok, I do EB3. So I do help employers to obtain EB3. So EB3 is the employment, and yes, absolutely. So get in touch now with the employer has to be the one to apply under the EB3. And so you should have a good conversation with your employer, or if the employer is looking to hire, make sure to refer them so we can talk about their situation and their needs. All right, have a good one. Have a great weekend, everyone. I'll see you on Monday, or I'll see you on Instagram in a quick minute. I'm the immigration attorney, or I'll speak with you in a consultation. So many ways to have a conversation with me. Have a great evening and weekend. Bye-bye.